good afternoon. Thank you for joining for the lecture. Today we are going to have another child psychiatry lecture. This is about conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder and antisocial traits. I would say yes, there are some common MCQs and SCQs can come from this lecture. But I would rather say this lecture is more important for your life as a doctor rather than for the exam. Right. To begin the lecture, let's watch a small clip from a very famous movie uh, from DC. So let's watch it and let's have a discussion.
Joke.
Right. So I'm sure you all have seen this movie. This is the famous character of Joker played by Heath Ledger, who won the Oscar for this role, but only after his death, after he committed suicide. This is not the Joker played by Joaquin Phoenix, who also won the Oscar for the same character. So here, if you listen to this dialogue, I hope you heard the dialogue. Here the Joker, who's a cold-blooded criminal, but far intellectually superior than Batman, he tries to manipulate Batman into making Bruce believe that they are in the same team. So actually they are completing two different teams, ideally for good and evil. But the Joker is manipulating very intelligently Batman into thinking that both of us are freaks and we are in the same path. So you need to be on my side. Right. So these kind of people who lack sympathy and only cares about themselves and do not validate other people's emotions are said to be having what we call the antipersonal socialite. Conduct disorder is a variant that is seen of antisocial personality in childhood and teenage years. So it is a mental disorder, and because many people do not understand this as a disorder, only a very few would obtain treatment, and some kids will be labeled as bad children. And conduct disorder is closely associated with oppositional defiant disorder or ODD, and we will discuss about ODD later in the lecture. And some with conduct disorder will develop antisocial personality as adults. So it is relatively common than most of the disorders you learn in medicine and pediatrics, and it is said to be more prevalent in males compared to females. So in the ICD-10, you have to know this classification just briefly, not everything here, because you have to write the appropriate ICD term for SCQ answers. So in the ICD-10, conduct disorders are divided into 6 types, and one of the types, 9.1.3, is oppositional defiant disorder. So in the ICD-10, ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, is one type of conduct disorder. So what are the features mentioned in ICD-10 for conduct disorder? So it says conduct disorders are characterized by a repetitive and persistent pattern of dissocial means Samaja Virodhi, aggressive and defiant conduct. Defiant means goes against the authority. Such behavior, when at its most extreme for individual, should amount to major violations of age-appropriate social expectations and therefore more severe than ordinary childish mischief or adolescent rebelliousness. So a teenager who is stealing money from their parents' pockets, or who steals from his friends, or breaks school rules may have conduct disorder. So the third paragraph, it says conduct disorder is frequently associated with adverse psychosocial environments, including unsatisfactory family relationships and failure at school, and is more commonly noted in boys. So if you take ADHD and autism, they are mostly genetic disorders. They are not caused by the environment they live in. But on the other hand, conduct disorder prevalence is closely associated with the criminality of the said neighborhood. So, certain parts of Colombo, maybe say Vanathamulla, or certain parts of Ragama, maybe everywhere around Ragama, may be notorious for prevalence of more criminal activity. So that means that neighborhoods will give rise to more teenagers with conduct disorder. Further, you can read the ICD-10 criteria. So this is very important for the common MCQ. So there will be different features at different steps in development. We will come to that next. Right. So in the ICD-10, one subtype of conduct disorder is oppositional defiant disorder. But in DSM-5 of the American Psychiatric Association, oppositional defiant disorder is a separate diagnosis and conduct disorder is a separate to that. The DSM-5 divides the conduct disorder into childhood onset type with poor prognosis and also adolescent onset type with better prognosis. So let's discuss what it means by conduct disorder. So these kids or teenagers have repetitive and persistent patterns of behavior that would violate other people's rights. They may go and vandalize public property, or they may write their name on a school wall, or they may steal or do violent activities that would harm others. So this violation of other people's rights, අනිත්‍යගේ අයිතිවාසිකම් කැඩීම, can come in different categories. Some people are aggressive to people and animals. So animal cruelty. You may be seeing a 7-year-old child in 2 years' time in your clinic, where the complaint of the parent is that the child is extremely cruel to the pet cat, like squeezes the neck or pulls from the tail. Or sometimes kids are brought saying that they have even stamped on little kittens. Or it can be the breaking of rules could be in the domain of destruction of property, or stealing, or deceitfulness, that means tricking others. And sometimes there can be serious violation of rules and breaking of rules. So children and teenagers and adults with antisocial personality lack remorse or guilt. Remorse means they do not regret doing something bad. And they do not have the guilt that normal people would have when they do something, when they do a mistake. So they said to lack empathy, and they seem to be unconcerned about what others would feel when they do these things. So the childhood onset, where the conduct symptoms are prominently seen in the childhood, has a worse prognosis compared to the teenage onset time. So what sort of factors lead to kids developing conduct disorder? So infants with difficult temperament in the small early months, they are difficult to make them go to sleep, always crying, irritable, and kids with lower intelligence can develop conduct disorder. In the environment, if there is parental neglect, or the parents are fighting with each other, or the parents have gone to jail themselves, or the parents are a bit harsh, and the large family size are factors that could lead to conduct disorder. So Most of the child psychiatric disorders are more likely to occur if there are more kids in the family. Apart from the family, the neighborhood matters as well. So if the neighborhood has a lot of violence and there is a lot of delinquent peers, delinquency means teenagers who break the law. So if there are a lot of delinquency going on in the neighborhood, there is more likelihood of conduct disorder in that area. Also, it is said that these people lack empathy. Empathy means to ability to understand other people's emotions, is that they have biological differences in the brain. And repetitive studies have shown that they have a slower resting heart rate and low skin conductance. So how do they test this? They show them certain videos that shows violence and measure the heart rate or the skin electrical conductance of these people. So normal people, when they see violent videos or violent movies, their heart rate would rise and their skin conduction will increase. But people with antisocial personality and conduct disorder have a lesser rise in heart rate and skin conduction because they are not bothered by people faced with violence. So in the teenage years, conduct disorder in boys would present with fighting, stealing, vandalism means destroying other people's property, disciplinary problems in the school, and aggression. So physical aggression means hitting people. Relational aggression means you force other to do things in relationships. Girls, teenage girls would on the other hand, who has conduct disorder would present with lying. Truancy means escaping from the school without informing anyone and running away. Sometimes even in the teenage years, they may say they have fallen in love with the older male and they want to run away. Sometimes they may get into substance use and prostitution to find money to maintain their drug using habits. And they will also, if you have watched the movie Mean Girls, I think it's quite old, I think 15 years ago, that shows this typical relational aggression in teen girls with conduct disorder. So if you have not watched Mean Girls, it's a good movie to watch. Right. If you have any questions, please send through the Zoom chat. So what can look like conduct but not conduct? So there are slight confusion here because in the ICD-10, oppositional defiant disorder is a subtype of conduct. But the DSM-5, which is much better than ICD-10, they are two different disorders. So in oppositional defiant disorder, difference to conduct is that they have less severe symptoms and they are not usually aggressive to others. They are angry, they don't follow instructions, they are vindictive, revengeful, but they do not usually harm other people. Sometimes kids with ADHD, because they are so impulsive, hyperactive, they may appear as if they are violent on purpose. Sometimes teenagers with bipolar affective disorder, especially during the hypermanic episodes, because in the manic episode, you can clearly see they are over talkative, so happy, excited. But in the hypermanic episode, you will not, a non-psychiatrist will find it difficult to detect a hypermanic episode. And in the hypermanic episode, they may become violent, which may look like conduct, but when the hypermanic episode is over, the aggression will come down. So sometimes adjustment disorder, for example, a new university student who has just entered the medical faculty, the adjustment from their home environment to university life may create stress and adjustment, which may show some conduct features for a brief period. So conduct disorder and ADHD are very closely associated because impulsivity, what we call in Sinhala Avegashili Sabhave, that is seen in ADHD, is seen in both conduct and ADHD. When teenagers are impulsive, they would do risky stuff like they would drive fast, use substances, get into unsafe relationships, and that is seen in both ADHD and conduct, and they are sometimes present together. Right. What is oppositional defiant disorder? So it is a mental disorder like conduct with very characteristic mood shifts. So they may have frequent irritable mood, they get frequently angry for minor things. They may be very defiant, that they frequently argue with authority, like say your parent or your supervisor instruct you on something, but you do not agree, you argue. And they usually blame others for their mistakes, and they are quite vindictive. Vindictive means they will never forget if someone has done something they don't like, and they would seek revenge. So because of that, there is a lot of arguments with the parents, teachers, and later with partners, and it is usually seen early in the preschool age. So let's look at the ICD-10 criteria for oppositional defiant disorder. So typically, is characteristically seen in children below the age of 9 or 10, and it is defined by the presence of markedly defiant, that means going against authority, disobedient, do not follow instructions, provocative, anitava avussanava, and by the absence of more severe dissocial aggressive acts that violate the law or rights of others. So usually they don't listen to instructions, they don't agree to others, they make others angry, but they do not usually cause severe harm to other people. So that is the difference between ODD and conduct. So all these terms I have highlighted have come in the common MCQ. So these are very important. So people with ODD have persistently negativistic. So they do not agree to others. So they are negativistic, hostile, prachandai, defiant, they do not listen to others, provocative, and disruptive behavior. So it should be out of the normally expected behavior for that age. And they usually do not have very serious violations of rights. They are easily annoyed by other people, and they would blame others for their frustration. And they are usually considered to be quite rude and uncooperative. So these are the symptoms shown in DSM-5 for ODD. If you just remember the parts I have highlighted, they are irritable mood, being argumentative. Irritable means nitarama taraha yanawa, argumentative nitarama එකට එක කියනවා, vindictive, wanting to get revenge. And these are the features usually seen in ODD that can be asked in common MCQs. So what can lead to development of antisocial and conduct disorder symptoms? So obviously genetic factors like father's criminality, mother's young age behavior problems, and a violent neighborhood and a violent family environment is a factor that can lead to development of conduct. So genetic and environmental factors together reduces the responsiveness of the amygdala. Amygdala is where we get our emotional responses in the limbic system. So you may remember me telling you that earlier, people with antisocial personality or conduct have less basic heart rate and skin conductions. Why that is? Because their amygdala is having a reduced responsiveness. So their amygdala do not respond to fear and violence stimuli like normal people. So because of this reduced responsiveness of emotions in others, it's hard for them to understand the same in others. So they fail to show empathy. And that can lead to conduct or as adults antisocial behavior. So what are the factors that would say the prognosis would be bad? If the symptoms starts early with many types of symptoms like stealing, destroying public property, arguing, many symptoms, high severity and frequency, and presence of symptoms in many settings. Conduct symptoms in school, conduct symptoms at home, conduct symptoms in the tuition class. That is a high indication of bad prognosis. In the family, if the parents has been diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder or parental criminality, and the parents are quite hostile, it would also indicate bad prognosis in the child. So what can happen in conduct disorder if it is not properly managed? So this is a frequent question that is asked in SCQs. In the last component of the SCQs, we usually ask about impact of different disorders. So they may, because they break rules, so they go to school, but they break rules. They escape from school, they truant, they steal other people's stuff, they make fun of teachers, so they may get suspended, and they may find it difficult to work under a boss. So because of these behaviors, they may have legal issues, sexually transmitted diseases, because they may get into risky relationships and unplanned pregnancies. And because of this, their impulsive behavior, sometimes they may get injured from accidents. So conduct disorder is closely associated with ODD, ADHD, depressive and anxiety disorders. And some of these conduct disorder teenagers have specific learning disorder or what we call dyslexia. How do we manage conduct disorder teenagers? So compared to other child psychiatric disorders, this is one of the most significantly complex areas of management. So this is very highly specialized, and usually in UK and Australia, this requires lot of resources, which is not available for our services. So for the child, we have behavioral modifications. For example, we say if you come to school on time, you would get a certain amount of token or star. So when you get 10 stars, you will be allowed to go and play, or you will be able to go and meet a friend. So that's a behavioral modification with a reward system. Then rather than becoming violent for their problems, we can teach them problem solving skills to solve their own problems and communicate with other people in a better way. And they may be helped with teaching coping skills to improve their frustration. For the family, there need to be a close coordination between the family members, school and clinicians, and parents will be given a training on how to react to this child who has become violent in the past. Sometimes we will conduct family psychotherapy for the whole family. So not only the child and the family changes are enough, because conduct disorder is very much based on the social environment. So there need to be better direct laws in the neighborhood. There should be availability of social services and probation services, because if the child breaks any significant rules, he may have to be removed from his home. So you may have heard of this person whose name is Phineas Gage. So he was a railway worker in United States about 150 years ago. He was a very calm, collected, normal person who was working just in the railway. One day, there was a blast that usually used to blast rocks to get the railway track going. And one of the blasts, one of the big iron rods came and went through his brain like this. So because of this iron rod piercing through his prefrontal cortex, he is said to have lost the connection between the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational brain, with the emotional brain, which is the limbic system. This disconnection then led to him having deficits in empathetic skills. So before this accident of brain damage, he did not have any problems in his behavior. He was a usually calm person. But after this accident, he lost his empathetic skills and he had become violent. So you can see how the brain changes even after an injury can cause symptoms as if in antisocial personality. Right, before we end up the lecture, let's discuss these two movie clips where you can clearly see antisocial personality in the main character played by Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie Catch Me If You Can.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes?
Do you know where room 17 French is?
Yeah.
You freaking killed him, dude.
You selling encyclopedias?
Yeah, he looks like a substitute
It's
teacher.
a lot of fun.
No, fine now. Take it.
I don't want you to keep playing.
Here you go. You're too slow. You're just too slow. Here.
Quiet down, people. My name is Mr. Abagnale. That's Abagnale, not Abagnale, not Abagnale, but Abagnale. Now, somebody please tell me where you left off in your textbooks. Excuse me, people, if I need to ask again, I'm going to write up the entire class. Take your seats.
Chapter 7.
Will you please open your textbooks to chapter 8, and we'll get started? Excuse me, what's your name?
Brad.
Brad, why don't you get up here in front of the class here and read conversation number 5.
Les Français sont généralement Donsler pays Q, press Q, tout le monde set impression.
They sent for me. They said they needed a sub for Roberta. I came all the way from Dixon.
Well, I always sub for Roberta. Excuse me, why aren't you reading?
QL's
I'll never come back to Bellamy Jefferson again. You tell them not to call me. What do they think? It's easy for a woman my age and all the money that it costs to travel? I tell you, they don't.
So you can see in this movie, the character played by Leonardo DiCaprio, he's just a college student. He was just coming to his new college. On the way, a kid who plays football, probably a popular student, just pushes him. So immediately when he comes to class, he finds a way to get the revenge, what we call vindictiveness, from the student who pushes him. So he is extremely intelligent. Not all people with antisocial personality have high intelligence. Only a few would have that, and they usually go into politics. And he immediately finds a way to turn things around and pretend that he's the substitute teacher. But when this old lady who has driven from another state in USA, which would have taken like 6-7 hours, he immediately does not show any empathy towards the plight of this woman. So that shows very clear antisocial personality. And one more movie clip and we can finish. This is from the same movie.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, John. I'll be back again.
Good. Have you stayed with us before?
No, I've been primarily based on the West Coast. Is it all right if I write you a check for the room?
No problem, sir.
Great. I was also wondering if I could write you a personal check.
For airline personnel, we cash personal checks up to $100. Payroll checks, we cash up to $300.
Did you say $300 for a payroll check? Dear Dad, I've decided to become a pilot for Pan American Airways, the most trusted name in the skies. They have accepted me into their training program and told me that if I work hard, I should earn my wings real soon. Please get in touch with Joanna Carlton from the 10th grade. Tell her I'm sorry that I could not take her to the junior prom. Love, your son, Frank.
Fine, thank you.
I have a payroll check here I'd like to cash.
Certainly.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but you have the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen.
Yeah, I do get that all the time. How would you like it?
So you can see he's a fake pilot. He does not have any training. He's just a college kid. He got to know that if he can make fake checks, he can get up to $300, and immediately he finds a way to make money. And when he went to the bank to cash the check, he said something very nice to the lady there to trick her and evoke an emotional response in her and get what he wants.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So thank you very much for joining in. I will meet tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for the other 3 child psychiatry lectures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.